And a good morning to you. Welcome to Orlando Matters. I'm Keith Landry, and I hope you're having a wonderful holiday weekend with the family, a little time to unwind and enjoy. We're going to have an update for you on this week's events in the George Zimmerman trial coming up. But right now we're starting this week on Orlando Matters with some of the most important state issues facing us here in Florida. We've got State Senator Darren Soto, a Democrat from Kissimmee. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Keith.
All right, let's talk about some of these top issues. Medicaid, Medicaid expansion, the implementation of Medicaid reform, and the legislature in Florida not getting anything done on it in 2013 are kind of the headlines we're still talking about. Do you think there will be a special session anytime in 2013 to finally address this issue?
Well, there was some discussion among Republican leadership in the Senate about going with the governor and calling a special session, but Speaker Will Weatherford this past week came out and said that wasn't a good idea based upon the fact that the House hasn't come around to any agreement or the Senate bipartisan compromise that we passed this past session. So I think it's unlikely, but you'll see the beginnings of a deal hopefully form over the first couple committee weeks in the fall.
So it was an interesting development during the legislature. We had clear support in the Senate to take action, and even the Governor Scott sort of did a little flip-flop on this one from an earlier position and said, let's go ahead and take that $51 billion from the federal government over the next 10 years because we might as well just use it, basically.
Well, first of all, we're talking about over 1 million Floridians being covered with health insurance that right now are costing the system. And it would be folks who are from 100% to 137% of the poverty line who right now wouldn't be eligible for the exchanges, nor would they be eligible under Medicaid. And this also means, as importantly, if not more importantly, $51 billion being infused into our economy over the next 10 years, which is why everyone from the Florida Chamber of Commerce and AIF to healthcare advocate groups have been pushing for this, and obviously the hospitals as well, because we're paying for this already. The big issue is going to be that it could hurt our bonding, it could hurt our economy, as Moody's has already pointed out, and we're looking at businesses who will have to pick up the slack. If those costs aren't paid by these folks through the drawing down the federal dollars, then those of us who are paying are going to have to pick up those costs. In addition, the state's already paying billions of dollars in uninsured care to the teaching hospitals and other hospitals who take these folks.
House leaders said, well, we've got a federal government that's got massive debt, they're running up deficits, and quite frankly, we don't trust them to give us the $51 billion. We can't trust them to put this into our budget. What's your response to that?
Well, it's in law already, and our head economist already had stated that they have to go by what the law says. And the law says that we get 100% for the first 3 years and then 10% after that. They haven't changed the Medicaid drawdown at 65% that we've had for decades. So there's a track record of the federal government keeping its word on the percentages that they've given us. And at the end of the day, they have already passed this bill. Florida has this opportunity. The feds need to deal with the federal debt crisis. We here at home are already a donor state to the federal government. We give the federal government many more billions than we ever get back.
So we send it up to Washington in tax dollars, but some of that never comes back down to us.
Right, and that's the real folly in this whole thing, is that we're paying up there and we're not even getting the benefit of our tax dollars. And at the end of the day, you have the Senate on board with a bipartisan plan passing 39-1, which would draw down the federal dollars and then allow people to have subsidies for private insurance. So we wouldn't even be expanding Medicaid. And then the governor's on board, even though he's not a big fan of a lot of the president's policies. And so we see the House out there isolated, really demagoguing and pushing a partisan agenda on this one. And I think it's going to hurt Florida if they don't act.
How is the state of Florida going to set up exchanges, or will they just punt and let the federal government do it for us?
We've already passed a bill that will acknowledge we are not going to do the exchanges. The federal government's going to do the exchanges. With the deadlines coming up, we believe that the federal government would be in a better position to do so, and we would allow them to do so. The only thing we're fighting to do is to have this Medicaid alternative program, this subsidy program for private insurance, and to give insurance to more than 1 million Floridians here in the state who are uninsured right now.
Let's switch gears, talk a little bit about the environment. Last several years here in Central Florida, we've been hearing a lot about impacts to our water, the aquifer, some of our springs. A lot of talk about Wekiva Springs having some health problems. What are you focused on for improving the health of our springs and waterways in Florida?
Well, we got the ball rolling last session with the Spring Revival Bill, which would require the water management districts within 5 years to get all Tier 1 springs back to historic flow and quality. Now, that was a heavy hammer we would have gave them, and it set the bar for this push that the springs are important and that we have to do something, and we have to do something that is aggressive. This past year, we were able to get leaders in both the House and the Senate to at least put in $10 million for springs restoration. That happened at the last moment. Representative Linda Stewart and I basically led the way on that. I sit on the Appropriations Committee in the Senate that deals with that. So it was a minor victory, but it's still not enough. We have estimates from the Water Management District to take over $100 million to restore the springs. And the springs are only a sign of what water quality is. So even whether you appreciate the springs and the environment, everybody needs clean water. And the springs show the symptom of what's happening below in the Floridan aquifer, where we get the vast majority of our water. And what's happening is we are running low on water, and it's no secret around here. And when you add pollutants to it, now you have a lack of flow, a lack of quantity of water to support the populations we have here, and then you're polluting the areas that are dealing with it. And fertilizer is a big issue with it. And in addition, water use permits. We've had to really come down on the water management districts that we don't want huge new permits being issued. We, as it is, are having trouble providing water for all of our constituents. So I think you'll see going into next year major projects at least dealing with the flow issue by building bigger reservoirs to prevent more of the runoff from going into the ocean. But there is a lot of opposition to dealing with the quality issue because there's tough decisions that have to be made on fertilizers, on dealing with septic tanks, on dealing with agriculture, and dealing with water use permits. These are tough decisions. So I think you'll see at least some move with regard to storing water to create more of a flow, which will dilute some of these pollutants at least. And it's a step forward at the very minimum.
Short-term solution toward a larger issue.
Right.
All right, let's talk a little bit about education. We've been hearing a lot, especially in the past week, about some of the tests that could replace the FCAT, and we're not talking about the end-of-year exams. It's the other standards. Do you think those are going to work?
I think that there's going to be some heartburn initially because we're going to be dealing with Common Core, with the national standards, and it's going to be the first time we really can gauge ourselves in comparison to the rest of the nation. And that's going to be a big issue because we really don't know. We have the FCAT, which is our own education test here, and it's going to be a big issue as far as whether or not our teachers and our kids are up to snuff. You know, my wife is a public school teacher, and I already hear it at home, the issues about whether we're going to be ready. What we did this year is at least allow that if you don't have the technology yet, that is also going to be a big deadline coming up, that you could implement it over the next couple of years. My thought is, while it'll be difficult, the world is getting more difficult. And the only thing I would say in addition is that we shouldn't be penalizing our schools who aren't doing perfectly on these exams with financial punishments, but we do need to know where we stand with regard to the rest of the nation, and which is why everyone from President Barack Obama to former Governor Jeb Bush is on board with these standards. But we'll have to wait and see how we do.
All right, State Senator Darren Soto, sure do appreciate you giving us some time this Saturday morning. Enjoy the rest of your holiday weekend, and thanks for being here with us.
My pleasure, Keith. Thanks for having me.
When we come back, we're going to give you the update on the George Zimmerman trial, what happened this week, and what lies ahead in the coming week. We'll be right back.